The first time my audition started without me, I was standing barefoot in a locked practice hallway with my violin case pressed against my chest like it was a wounded animal, listening to my name echo from the auditorium speakers while the girl who stole my key cried prettily in front of the judges and said she had tried everything to find me. The second time my audition day arrived, I woke up before dawn with that same announcement still ringing inside my skull, except now my feet were warm under a dormitory blanket. My violin was still beside my desk, and the silver practice room key that had ruined my life was hanging untouched from the ribbon on my wall. For 1 full minute, I did not breathe. I only stared at it. Room 408. The room with the good upright piano, the clean mirror, the window that faced the maple trees, and the acoustics every vocalist and violinist in Westbridge Conservatory secretly wanted. The room I had earned by winning the internal practice lottery. The room I had stupidly shared with Celia Arden because she had grabbed both my hands yesterday, eyes wet, voice shaking, saying, "Please, Mara, I'll only use it for 10 minutes. My room smells like paint thinner. You know I can't warm up there before the grand audition." In my first life, I gave it to her because I thought kindness was proof that I deserved good things. I gave it to her because she was my friend, my roommate, my almost sister, the golden girl with soft blonde waves and a laugh like glass bells, and because every teacher said jealousy looked ugly on talented girls. I gave it to her because saying no felt cruel. Then she used that key to enter my practice room, hide my black performance heels, soak the edge of my sheet music with water so the ink bled into gray ghosts, switch the time card on the door, lock my spare bow inside the piano bench, and tell the audition coordinator I had panicked and disappeared. When I finally got in, my slot had passed, my accompanist had left, my strings were still cold, and Celia was already on stage wearing my hairpin. She won the scholarship. I won pity, then suspicion, then a slow collapse that lasted years. So when I woke up reborn on the morning before everything broke, staring at that little silver key, I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not make a vow at the ceiling like heroines did in cheap stage dramas. I sat up, reached for the key, closed my fist around it, and whispered to the empty room, "Not again." Then, because the universe apparently had a sense of timing sharp enough to cut skin, my phone buzzed on the blanket. Celia's name lit the screen. One message, then another, each one arriving like a small knock on a coffin lid. "Mara, are you awake? Don't be mad, but I really need 408 today. Just for warm-up. You trust me, right?" I looked at the words until the letters blurred, and something in me, something that had spent an entire first life apologizing for being inconvenient, finally stood up straight. I typed 3 words. "No, I don't." I did not send a paragraph. I did not explain. I did not soften it with sorry. I pressed send, watched the bubble vanish, and felt the first chain fall off my throat. Celia did not answer immediately, and that silence told me more than any confession could have. In my first life, she had replied with wounded sweetness within seconds, acting as if my hesitation was a tiny betrayal she was willing to forgive. This time, my refusal had caught her off script. I could almost see her across campus in the senior residence, sitting on her pale pink duvet with rollers in her hair, her mother's pearl earrings already clipped on, staring at her phone with her mouth slightly open because obedient little Maraven had finally done something unplanned. That was the strange thing about being reborn. The world looked identical, but every ordinary object had teeth. My kettle clicked, and I remembered the tea Celia had accidentally spilled onto my audition blouse. My closet door creaked, and I remembered searching inside it for shoes that were no longer there. The radiator hissed, and I remembered the practice hallway smelling like varnish and old dust while the announcer called, "Final call for candidate 22, Maraven." I moved carefully, not because I was afraid, but because rage made my hands too steady. First, I photographed the practice room key on my wall with the timestamp visible. Then I slipped it onto the chain around my neck and tucked it under my sweater. I took my black heels from the closet and placed them in my violin case, beneath the false bottom my father had made for sheet music when I was 12. I folded my audition dress into a garment bag and locked it inside the main office wardrobe, not my dorm. I printed 3 copies of my music, sealed 2 in plastic sleeves, and put 1 in a folder labeled in thick marker, Mara Ven, Candidate 22, Grand Audition. I checked my official audition time on the conservatory portal, screenshot it, emailed it to myself, then forwarded it to the audition coordinator with a polite message, confirming my 11:40 slot and my assigned practice reservation in room 408 from 7 to 10:30. In my first life, I had trusted memory. In my second, I trusted records. By 6:05, I was dressed in warm-ups, hair braided tight, violin case on my shoulder, and the morning still blew outside my window. I opened my door and nearly stepped on a white envelope someone had slid underneath it. For one ridiculous second, I thought perhaps fate had sent me a warning in calligraphy. Then I saw Celia's looping handwriting. "Don't be like this." I picked it up with 2 fingers. Inside was not a letter. It was a single photograph from freshman year, Celia and me in matching black concert dresses, arms around each other, cheeks flushed after our first chamber recital. On the back, she had written, "Remember who was there for you when nobody knew your name." In my first life, that would have pierced me. I would have remembered how she invited me to lunch, how she complimented my vibrato, how she introduced me to seniors who forgot my name anyway. I would have mistaken proximity for loyalty. This time, I turned the photo over once, slid it into my desk drawer, and locked the drawer. She had been there when nobody knew my name, because nobody was watching her stand beside me yet. That was not friendship. That was rehearsal. The conservatory before sunrise looked like a cathedral built by anxious people. Every window glowed, with one terrified musician behind it. From the east wing came scales. From the basement came a cellist repeating one phrase as if repetition could bully fate into mercy, and from somewhere above me a soprano sang a high note that cracked, stopped, then returned sharper and colder. The grand audition was not just an audition. It was the door. 1 full scholarship to the European summer circuit. 1 assistantship with Maestro Bellini. 1 recording session with the Westbridge donors. 1 name printed in the alumni magazine under Promising Young Artists. For students like Celia, whose parents donated new curtains to the recital hall, it was a crown. For students like me, whose mother cleaned medical offices at night, and whose father restrung school violins for grocery money, it was oxygen. In my first life, losing it did not simply disappoint me. It rearranged the way teachers looked at me. Before the audition, I was intense, disciplined, promising. After missing my slot, I became fragile, unreliable, too emotional under pressure. Celia did not need to destroy my talent. She only needed to place 1 question mark beside my name and let polite people do the rest. As I crossed the courtyard, my phone buzzed again. "Celia, Mara, please. I don't know what mood you're in, but you're scaring me." Another message. "I already told Mr. Halden I'd warm up in 408 because you always share. Please don't embarrass me today." There it was. Not need. Not panic. Entitlement. I stopped under the bare maple tree outside the practice wing and let the cold bite my cheeks. A year ago, in this same morning, I had responded, "Of course. Just don't lose it, haha." I could still feel the ghost of that stupid little laugh. Instead, I typed, "I did not give permission. Room 408 is assigned to me. Please use your assigned room." I sent it, then immediately forwarded the exchange to my own email. Not because I wanted drama, but because girls like Celia could turn air into evidence if you left it unclaimed. When I reached the practice wing, old Mr. Niles was unlocking the front doors, his gray scarf tucked into his coat. He had worked security for 22 years and could identify every student by instrument case shape. In my first life, Celia had told everyone I must have taken a side exit and wandered off in a panic. Mr. Niles had not seen me because I had been locked in the service corridor. This time, I smiled at him before he could look away. "Good morning, Mr. Niles."
Moraven.
Candidate 22. "I'm signing in for room 408 at 6:42. He blinked at the specificity, then chuckled. "Big day, Miss Ven?"
"The biggest," I said.
He handed me the clipboard. I wrote my name slowly, pressing hard enough for the pen to leave grooves in the page. Then I looked directly at the security camera above his desk and adjusted the chain around my neck so the key glinted once before disappearing beneath my collar. Room 408 smelled exactly as I remembered: lemon polish, old wood, and the faint metallic tang of nervous hands on piano keys. Morning light pooled across the floorboards. The mirror reflected a girl I recognized and did not recognize at all. Same dark hair. Same pale face from Too Little Sleep. Same brown eyes people called serious when they were being kind and cold when they were not. But my mouth was different. It had learned silence could be a blade. I locked the door behind me, checked the window latch, opened the piano bench, and froze. Inside, beneath a stack of old theory workbooks, was a folded blue scarf. Celia's scarf. In my first life, I had never seen it there because by the time I entered the room, everything had already been rearranged, violated, made strange. I lifted it with the tip of my bow. A small brass key fell out and struck the wood with a delicate click. For 3 seconds, all I could hear was my pulse.
Then the pattern changed.
This was not part of the memory. Not exactly. I knelt, picked up the brass key with a tissue, and turned it over. A paper tag was tied to it. Wardrobe B. My stomach tightened. The main office wardrobe had 3 sections: A for faculty robes, B for audition candidate stored garments, C for donor event materials. Yesterday, before my rebirth, before I remembered the first life, I had planned to keep my dress in my dorm closet. In that first life, Celia had hidden my shoes and ruined my blouse, but she had not needed to touch the wardrobe because I had never used it. This time, I had locked my dress in wardrobe B 20 minutes ago. The brass key in her scarf meant Celia had already arranged access. Not to help herself. To reach whatever belonged to me. The room seemed to tilt, but I forced myself to breathe once, twice, then opened my phone and took photos. Scarf and bench, key beside scarf, tag visible, timestamp. I did not touch anything else. I did not march to Celia. I did not throw the door open and shout. In my first life, I had lost because I reacted after the damage. In this one, I would document before the performance began. I called the front desk. Mr. Niles? This is Mara in 408. I found an item in the piano bench that doesn't belong to me. It includes what appears to be a wardrobe key. Could you please send someone from administration to collect it? There was a pause. A wardrobe key? Yes. Another pause, heavier now. Don't move anything else. I won't. I hung up and stood very still, looking at the scarf as if it might breathe. Outside the door, footsteps approached fast, then stopped. A soft knock. 3 taps. Celia's rhythm. Mara? Her voice was honey poured over broken glass. Open up. I know you're in there. I looked at the scarf. I looked at the door. For one bright, almost funny second, I imagined opening it just wide enough to hand her the scarf and watch her face collapse. Instead, I placed my violin on the chair, lifted my chin, and said, I'm practicing. The doorknob turned.
Once. Twice.
Then harder. Mara, don't be childish. I smiled at myself in the mirror. My hands were not shaking. Use your assigned room, Celia. She stopped pretending immediately. That was the first gift my refusal gave me, the sound of her real voice. You are being incredibly selfish. She hissed through the door, low enough that anyone passing might miss it, sharp enough that I would not. My accompanist is meeting me here.
Why?
I asked. Because yesterday you said, she caught herself. Yesterday, before my memories returned, I had never said yes. She had assumed I would. She had built an entire lie on the foundation of my expected obedience. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear a violinist 2 rooms away botch a shift. Then Celia laughed, light and wounded again, a sound designed for witnesses who were not yet there. Okay, I understand. You're nervous and you're taking it out on me. That's fine. I forgive you. Just open the door and we'll talk like adults. I almost admired the speed. In another life, that voice had made me unlock everything. Doors, secrets, boundaries, grief. I would have opened the door just to prove I was not cruel. Instead, I rested my forehead against the wood and spoke softly enough that she had to lean in to hear me. You left your scarf in the piano bench. Nothing moved outside. Administration is coming to collect it. A tiny sound escaped her. Not a gasp. Not quite. More like a string snapping inside a wall. What scarf? She said. The blue one. I don't own a blue scarf. That was the second gift. A lie so quick it contradicted every photo on her public profile. Celia wore that scarf every winter because it matched her eyes, or at least that was what she told people while waiting for them to agree. I could see it in 10 different memories, looped around her throat as she accepted compliments meant for the whole ensemble. Then admin can identify it, I said. And the wardrobe key tied to it. The hallway went alive with motion. Someone whispered. Someone else slowed down. Celia realized we were no longer alone. Her voice rose half an octave, trembling in precisely the way teachers found persuasive. Mara, what are you talking about? Are you accusing me of something on audition day? After everything I've done for you? The old hook. Gratitude as a leash. The first time she used it, I let it pull me all the way to ruin. This time, I opened my folder, took out my first copy of the book, and placed it on the stand. I'm warming up now, I said. Please don't interrupt my assigned time. Then I began to play open strings, slow and even, letting each note swell until it filled the room and pressed itself against the door between us. Celia said my name once more, but I played over it. Not loudly, not angrily, just steadily. The sound was not beautiful yet. It did not need to be. It only needed to continue without her permission. By 7:05, the corridor outside 408 had become a stage, and Celia, who hated being caught without lighting, tried to direct it anyway. Ms. Renner from administration arrived with Mr. Niles and Professor Ilian, the deputy chair, who had the exhausted expression of a man already regretting every talented teenager ever admitted to the conservatory. I opened the door only after Mr. Niles identified himself, and I kept the chain key visible at my throat. Celia stood 3 steps back in a cream sweater dress and soft curls, looking so innocent it was almost violent. 2 freshmen hovered behind her, pretending to check their phones. A violinist leaned against the radiator with a shameless focus of someone witnessing free entertainment before breakfast. Ms. Renner put on gloves, removed the scarf and brass key from the piano bench, and asked calmly, Miss Arden, is this yours? Celia's eyes filled instantly, not with fear, with calculation. Tears were one of her instruments. She tuned them faster than I tuned my violin. It looks like mine, she whispered, but I lost it last week. Anyone could have put it there. The wardrobe key? Professor Ilian asked. I've never seen that before. It's tagged wardrobe B, Ms. Renner said. That key should be in the administrative lockbox. Celia pressed a hand to her mouth. That's frightening. Mara, did you find it? Why would you touch my scarf? The pronoun slipped out. My scarf. Her eyes flashed when she realized. Mr. Niles looked at her. The freshmen looked at each other. I said nothing. Silence, I had learned, made guilty people decorate the room themselves. Celia rushed to fill it. I mean, if it is mine, then obviously someone took it from me. Mara has been acting strangely all morning. She sent me horrible messages. I only came because I was worried about her. Ms. Renner glanced at me. Messages. I handed her my phone, already open to the thread. Her expression did not change as she scrolled, but Professor Ilian's mouth tightened at the sentence. I already told Mr. Halden I'd warm up in 408 because you always share. Who is Mr. Halden? He asked. Celia swallowed. My accompanist. Why was your accompanist told to meet you in another candidate's assigned practice room? Because Mara always lets me use it. Did she confirm that today? Celia looked at me then, and I saw something I had not allowed myself to see in my first life. Hatred without disguise. It was there for only a blink before the tears washed over it, but it steadied me more than kindness ever had. She hated me because I had something she wanted, and because she had assumed wanting was enough. She didn't have to, Celia said softly. We're friends. Professor Ilian sighed, and in that sigh I heard the old world hesitate. Friends. Such a pretty word. Such a useful weapon. I expected him to scold both of us, to tell me audition day was stressful, to tell Celia to be careful, to tell everyone to move along. That was how institutions survived girls like her, by smoothing every sharp edge until only the injured person bled quietly. But Ms. Renner was staring at the brass key now, and her face had changed. "Professor," she said, "Wardrobe B is where candidate garments are stored." Miss Venn checked in a garment bag this morning at 6:18. The corridor became very still. Celia's tears did not stop, but they lost rhythm. Professor Ilian turned to me. "Miss Venn, is your garment still in storage?" "I don't know," I said truthfully. "I haven't checked since I deposited it." He nodded to Mr. Niles. "Lockroom 408 after Miss Venn exits."
Ms. Renner, check wardrobe B now.
"Miss Arden, you will come with us." Celia stepped back. "But my warm-up. Your assigned room is 212, Ms. Renner said. "It has been available since 6:30. Celia looked at the closed door of 408, then at my violin, then at the key on my neck. For the first time that morning, she seemed to understand the simplest fact in the world. I had not attacked her. I had merely stopped opening doors. The first pattern interruption came at 7:26, when I was left alone in 408 and realized I could not play. Not because of Celia. Not because of fear. Because my body, the young body I had returned to, still carried the muscle memory of obedience. My chin settled on the rest, my bow touched the string, and instead of Bach, I heard the old announcement again. Candidate 22. Final call. I saw myself in the first life hammering on the wrong hallway door, one heel missing, hair coming loose, begging a janitor to believe my name was on the list. I saw Celia afterward, standing in the lobby under donor chandeliers while people touched her shoulder and said she had handled the unpleasantness with such grace. I saw Professor Vale avoiding my eyes for the rest of the semester. I saw my mother pretending not to cry in the car. I saw the email 2 weeks later. "We regret to inform you." I saw myself years after graduation, teaching beginner scales to children whose parents paid late, smiling through migraines, scrolling past Celia's concert posters until one night I finally noticed the hairpin she wore in every photo was mine. Then came the memory I tried hardest not to touch. The last night of that life. Rain on the windshield. My audition recording playing through old speakers, my hands gripping the wheel after I learned Celia had been appointed guest artist at the very academy that had discarded me. I had not died dramatically. There had been no villain laughing over me. Just wet road, blurred lights, exhaustion, and one thought so small it broke my heart even now. I wish I had kept the key. My bow slid sideways with a scrape ugly enough to make me flinch. I lowered the violin. For a moment, I was not a reborn heroine with perfect revenge timing. I was a girl in a room that smelled like lemon polish, shaking because trauma did not care how clever your plan was. Then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Mara Venn." A male voice whispered harshly. "This is Daniel Halden, Celia's accompanist. She told me the room changed to 408 and that you agreed to swap slots with her if needed. Is that true?" I closed my eyes. Another thread pulled loose. Daniel Halden was a postgraduate pianist with a reputation for punctuality, so severe people joked he arrived at concerts before the composer. In my first life, he had not accompanied me because he said he had been informed I withdrew. I had hated him for years. Perhaps I had hated the wrong person. "No," I said. I never agreed to a room change or a slot swap. A beat of silence. She sent me a screenshot. Of what? "A message from you." My mouth went dry. "I didn't send one." He exhaled slowly. "I'm forwarding it to you." The file arrived seconds later. It looked like my number, my name, my profile photo. The message read, "Celia can use 408 and take my early warm-up. I'm not feeling well. Might skip. Please don't tell anyone yet." My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles hurt. In the first life, that single forged message had probably been enough to make everyone believe I vanished by choice. Pattern interruption number 2. I had thought the key was the weapon. It was only the handle. At 8 o'clock, the conservatory began to wake fully, and with witnesses came danger. Rumor moved faster than scales. By 8:15, Half the audition candidates knew that Celia Arden's scarf had been found in my practice room with a wardrobe key, but the other half knew a different story, that I had lured her there, planted her things, and was having some kind of nervous breakdown before the most important performance of our lives. Both stories traveled side by side, passing each other in stairwells, growing prettier or uglier depending on who repeated them. I knew, because I heard my name through the door in fragments. Mara's always been intense. Celia would never. But why would there be a key? Maybe Mara forged the messages herself. She's scholarship desperate. That last one made me laugh once, silently. Scholarship desperate. As if needing money made me suspicious, and having it made Celia pure. I texted Daniel. Please forward the screenshot and any related messages to Ms. Renner and Professor Ilian. He replied, already did. Then, I'm sorry. I stared at those 2 words longer than I expected. In my first life, apologies always arrived after the doors closed. This one had come while there was still time to turn a handle. I put the phone away, tuned carefully, and forced myself back into sound. Open strings first, then slow scales, then the opening of the chaconne. Not fast, not impressive, but carved from the deepest part of me. The notes did not erase fear. They gave it somewhere to stand. When Ms. Renner returned 20 minutes later, she knocked like a person entering a sick room. Miss Venn. I opened the door. Her face was pale. Your garment bag is intact. Your dress is inside. However, we found someone attempted to access wardrobe B before 7. The lockbox log shows a key missing last night after rehearsal. Who signed the lockbox? I asked. She hesitated. That is being reviewed, which meant someone important, someone protected, or someone who should have known better. Professor Ilian would like to speak with you briefly. My stomach dropped. Am I in trouble? The question came out smaller than I wanted. Ms. Renner's face softened, and for a second she looked less like administration and more like a woman tired of watching young people learn how cruel ambition could be.
No.
But Miss Arden is claiming you gave her the key last night and asked her to collect your dress if you became too anxious. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the lie was so perfectly shaped to the old version of me. Anxious Mara. Fragile Mara. The girl who might ask a friend to rescue her and then forget. The girl whose talent was always one emotional storm away from inconvenience. I didn't, I said. I know, Ms. Renner said quietly. You checked your garment this morning after the alleged handoff. The timeline does not support her.
Timeline.
Evidence. Records. Such plain, unromantic words. They sounded like music. I stepped into the hallway with my violin case, locked 408 behind me, and felt every eye turn. Celia stood near the stairwell, surrounded by sympathy like perfume, her face blotched beautifully from crying. When she saw me, she lifted her chin, and the whole corridor seemed to hold its breath for the confrontation she expected me to give her. But I did not confront her. I walked past, close enough to smell her jasmine hairspray, and whispered, Your accompanist sent the screenshot. Her pupils widened. Then I kept walking. Behind me, for the first time all morning, Celia Arden forgot to cry. Professor Ilian's office had a wall of framed programs and a clock that sounded too loud for polite conversation. Ms. Renner sat beside his desk with a folder already open. Daniel Halden stood near the window, tall, dark-haired, jaw clenched, holding his tablet as if it had personally insulted him. Celia sat in the chair opposite the professor, hands folded in her lap, blue eyes shining. She looked smaller there, which was another performance. Powerful people loved fragile girls because they made rescue feel noble. Miss Venn, Professor Ilian said, Thank you for coming. This will be brief. We are not conducting a disciplinary hearing right now, but we need to clarify facts before the audition begins. Celia turned to me with trembling lips. Mara, please just tell them this is a misunderstanding. It was a good line. It offered me a role, merciful friend. It suggested that if I refused, I was choosing cruelty over peace. In my first life, I lived in side roles other people wrote for me. This time, I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable for everyone except me. Which part? I asked. Celia blinked. What? Which part is the misunderstanding? The scarf in my piano bench, the wardrobe key tied to it, the forged message to Daniel, or you telling him I might skip? Daniel's head lifted slightly. Professor Ilian watched Celia over his glasses. She inhaled in little broken pulls. You're twisting everything.
I was worried about you.
Last night after rehearsal, you said you felt sick. You said maybe you couldn't handle the pressure. I didn't want to embarrass you, so I tried to quietly help. Then why tell Daniel not to tell anyone? I asked. Because you asked me not to. Can you show that message? Her mouth opened.
Closed.
You deleted yours. Convenient, Daniel muttered. Professor Ilian glanced at him. Mr. Halden. Daniel looked away, but not before I saw anger there, and shame. Celia shifted tactics. Mara has always been jealous of me, she whispered. Everyone knows it. She thinks I get opportunities because of my parents. She told me once that if I disappeared, maybe teachers would finally hear her. That sentence hit harder because it was almost true, twisted around a lie. I had said something like it once in a practice room after Professor Vale praised Celia for a performance I had coached her through. I had said, sometimes I wonder if anyone would hear me if you weren't standing so close. Celia had hugged me then. She had said, don't be silly. I'm your biggest supporter. Now she turned that private ache into a blade and held it up for adults to inspect. I felt the old shame rise, hot and automatic. Then Daniel spoke, careful now. For what it's worth, Professor, Miss Arden told me 2 weeks ago that Miss Venn was unstable about the audition and might need handling. I assumed it was concern. Ms. Renner wrote something down. Celia's head snapped toward him. Daniel. His expression hardened. Don't. One word.
Flat.
Final. The room changed. Celia sensed it and began to cry in earnest, but tears without control are different from tears with timing. These came too fast, making her nose redden, making her voice rough. I don't understand why everyone is attacking me. I lost my scarf. Someone took a key. Someone sent a message. Why is it automatically my fault just because Mara found everything? Maybe she planned this. Maybe she wanted me distracted. My audition is today too. Professor Ilian folded his hands. Then you should return to your assigned practice room and prepare. She stared at him. That's it. For now. But she's accusing me. And you are accusing her. We will review evidence after the auditions. No candidate's slot will be moved unless there is a documented emergency. There it was, quiet and devastating. No slot moved. In my first life, Celia had slid herself into my absence like water taking the shape of a stolen cup. This time, the cup stayed in my hand. Celia stood, face pale beneath the flush. I need my warm-up materials. They are in your assigned room? Ms. Renner asked. Celia hesitated 1 second too long. Some of them. Where are the rest? Another hesitation. I need to check. Professor Ilian looked at the clock. Your audition is at 10:20, Miss Arden. It is 8:38. I suggest you use the remaining time wisely. She nodded, but her eyes moved to my throat, to the outline of the key beneath my sweater, with such naked desperation that even Professor Ilian noticed. Only then did I realize she did not merely want 408 to sabotage me. Something of hers was trapped behind my refusal. The third pattern interruption arrived wrapped in a memory I had misunderstood for years. In my first life, after Celia won, people whispered that her performance had been miraculous because she played the rarely performed Varga cadenza from memory, the one Professor Vale had praised in my private lessons and told me not to share because interpretive discoveries are currency. I had assumed she stole my annotated score from my case during the chaos. But standing in the hallway outside Ilian's office, watching Celia hurry toward the stairs instead of her assigned room 212, I remembered something else. The night before the audition, she had sat on my bed eating strawberries from a paper cup, listening as I explained how I planned to pace the cadenza. She had seemed bored. She had asked to borrow my room key for the morning. Then, while I showered, she had taken my spare practice notebook, the small green one where I wrote fingering experiments, stage cues, emotional anchors, everything. In the first life, I thought I misplaced it during the disaster. In this life, I had found it last night on my desk and locked it in my violin case before sleeping. If Celia had planned to reproduce my cadenza again, she needed that notebook. If she had told donors, teachers, maybe even her parents that she would perform a bold interpretation, she needed the map she had expected to steal. My key did not just protect my room. It protected the one thing Celia could not fake under pressure: preparation. I followed at a distance, not sneaking, not chasing, simply walking the public hallway toward 408 because my practice time was still mine. Celia stopped outside my door, looked both ways, and tried the handle.
Locked.
She knocked once, then remembered I was behind her and spun around. Her face rearranged itself too late. I thought you were in the office. I left. I need my scarf. Administration has it. There are things in that room that belong to me. Then tell Ms. Renner. Don't be smug. The words came out raw, stripped clean of sweetness. A cellist passing behind us slowed down so dramatically he almost collided with a harpist. Celia lowered her voice. You think you're clever because you woke up mean today?
Fine.
Keep the room.
Keep the stupid key.
But if you ruin this audition for me, Mara, you will regret it. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. It sounded unfamiliar, not happy, not cruel, more like a door opening in an abandoned house. I already did. Her brows drew together. What? I stepped closer, close enough that only she could hear. I regretted it for years. For 1 second, the hallway vanished. I was looking not at a classmate, but at the shadow she had cast across an entire life. She did not understand the words, but she felt the weight of them.
I saw it. She took a step back.
You're insane. Maybe, I said. But I'm early. Then I unlocked room 408 with my key, entered, and closed the door gently in her face. It was not a slam. It was worse. A slam invited drama. A gentle closing announced ownership. Inside 408, the sun had risen high enough to catch dust in the air, each speck turning slowly, as if even time wanted to watch. I practiced for nearly an hour with a focus so sharp it became strange. Not perfect. Never perfect. Perfection was a rumor frightened artists told themselves. But present. I played the Bach until my forearm burned, then the Saint-Saëns until the room seemed to tilt with color, then the Varga cadenza I had built from pain in my first life, without knowing I was building a weapon for another girl. This time, I changed it. Not to hide it from Celia, not exactly, but because the old cadenza belonged to the girl who still hoped being extraordinary would make people kind. I was no longer her. I shifted the opening down into a darker register, added a pause where I used to rush, let the harmonic ring a half-breath longer, then cut into the ascending run with a clean, dangerous bite.
The phrase startled me.
I stopped, heart thudding.
There.
Not prettier.
Tua.
I wrote the change in the green notebook, then locked it away again. At 9:32, someone knocked.
Not Celia.
Too firm. Mara? It's Professor Vale. My bow froze midair. Of all the ghosts this day could summon, he was the one I wanted least. Professor Adrian Vale had been my private instructor for 2 years, brilliant, impatient, admired by donors, feared by students, and in my first life, quietly absent when I needed him most. He had not sabotaged me. He had done something worse in institutions. He had chosen not to risk his comfort for the truth. After my missed audition, he said, Mara, optics matter. Even if there were complications, you must understand how this looks. Later, when Celia performed my cadenza, he praised her instinctive architecture in front of everyone. I opened the door only halfway. He stood in a charcoal coat, silver hair neat, expression troubled in the way adults look troubled when they suspect teenagers have brought consequences near their shoes. May I come in? I'm practicin'. His eyebrows lifted at my tone. Old Mara would have stepped aside so fast she bumped the stand. I heard there was an incident. Several. Celia is very upset.
Of course.
That was the first sentence. Not, are you all right? Not what happened. Celia is upset. I felt something inside me turn cold and clean. Then she should practice. His mouth tightened. Mara. There it was, the teacher voice, velvet over command. Today is too important for a personal conflict. You and Celia have always had a complicated friendship. I know she can be careless, but accusing another candidate of theft or forgery minutes before the audition could damage both of you. I didn't accuse her publicly. I reported an unauthorized wardrobe key found in my assigned room. And yet the corridor is buzzing. I don't control the corridor. He sighed. You are talented, Mara. Exceptionally talented. But talent can curdle when mixed with resentment. The sentence landed, and for a moment I saw my first life self again, absorbing criticism like scripture, because it came from a man with framed awards. Then I looked at the room. My key. My music. My records. Professor, I said, did you tell Celia about my Varga cadenza? His face changed by almost nothing, but I had spent 2 lives reading musicians. A breath held is a confession in miniature. We discuss interpretation broadly in studio. Did you show her my marked score? Don't be dramatic. Did you? He looked toward the hallway, then lowered his voice. Celia needed guidance. She was struggling to find a distinctive approach. I may have mentioned some concepts from your lessons, but music is not property, Mara. There it was. The philosophy of thieves, polished until it sounded like mentorship. Music is not property. Neither was a room, until Celia wanted mine. Neither was time, until mine was stolen. Neither was a girl's future, until someone else wore it well. I nodded slowly. Thank you for clarifying. His eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means I understand why she expected to perform my work. His cheeks colored. Be careful. The warning was soft. That made it uglier. I smiled, and because I had been reborn, because I had already lived through the punishment he could offer, because fear had spent its best years on me and come back empty-handed, I said, You too. Then I closed the door on him as gently as I had closed it on Celia. At 10 o'clock, the audition wing transformed from school into courtroom. Candidates moved in silence now, no longer laughing too loudly or pretending not to compare dresses. Parents gathered near the lobby flowers. Donors sat in reserved seats with programs on their laps, delighted by the drama of young ambition as long as nobody called it that. The auditorium doors opened and swallowed candidate 17. Celia was candidate 18. I was 22. In my first life, by this time I had been locked out of my own preparation and running on panic. Celia had been waiting behind the stage curtain, calm because she had already arranged my disappearance. This time, I saw her before she saw me. She stood near the side corridor in her pale blue performance gown, the one everyone said made her look like a winter princess, clutching her violin case with both hands. Her mother hovered beside her, diamond bracelet flashing under fluorescent lights. Mrs. Arden was beautiful in the expensive, sharpened way of women who believed polish was moral evidence. This is absurd, she was saying to Professor Ilian. Celia has been harassed all morning, and now you expect her to perform as if nothing happened? Celia looked fragile enough to dissolve, but her eyes kept darting past them, toward the practice stairwell, not toward the auditorium, not toward her accompanist, toward the room she could not enter. Daniel Halden stood several feet away, tablet tucked under his arm, expression closed. When Celia saw him, she rushed over. Daniel, thank God. Did you get the revised cadenza notes? He stared at her. What revised notes? The ones in 408. The sentence burst out before she could stop it. Mrs. Arden turned. Professor Ilian turned. Daniel turned. Even I, across the hallway, felt the air crack. Celia's face went white. I mean, Mara's notes. She promised I could look at them. For comparison. Daniel's voice was quiet. You told me they were yours. I said based on mine.
No, he said.
You said you had finally written your own architecture and wanted me to follow your rubato exactly. Celia's mouth trembled. Why are you doing this to me? Daniel laughed once, without humor. Because I don't enjoy being used to launder plagiarism before breakfast. Mrs. Arden gasped. How dare you? Professor Ilian raised a hand, but the auditorium door opened before he could speak. Candidate 17 emerged pale and shaking. The stage manager stepped out with her clipboard. Candidate 18, Celia Arden. Please proceed backstage. The timing was so perfect it felt staged by a cruel god with excellent rhythm. Celia did not move. Her gaze flew to the stairwell again. The stage manager repeated, Candidate 18. Celia swallowed. I need 5 minutes. Your slot begins in 2. I need my marked score. Daniel said, You submitted your official score last week. I need my personal marks. Professor Ilian's eyes hardened. Where are they? Celia looked at me. Everyone followed her gaze. The old world offered me one last chance to step into the role it loved. Helpful Mara, forgiving Mara, Mara who would save the girl holding a knife because the knife was shaking. I touched the key beneath my sweater. Not in my room, I said. Celia's face twisted.
You don't know that.
I know what's mine. The stage manager checked the clipboard. Candidate 18, final call. That phrase, final call, it passed through me like cold water. In my first life, it had been the sound of a door closing. This time, I watched Celia Arden stand in a hallway full of witnesses while her audition began without her, and I did not feel joy. I felt balance. Celia tried to run. Not away from the audition, not at first, but toward 408, as if speed could turn refusal into access. Mrs. Arden called her name. Professor Ilian moved to block her, but Celia slipped past him with the desperate agility of someone who had never been physically denied anything in her life. I do not know what she imagined would happen when she reached the door. Maybe she thought she could pound until I surrendered. Maybe she thought the lock would forgive her. Maybe some childish part of her believed rooms open for girls who cried beautifully enough. She made it halfway down the corridor before Mr. Niles appeared from the stairwell carrying a ring of official keys and wearing the expression of a man who had raised 3 daughters and tolerated no theatrical nonsense before lunch. Miss Arden, he said, you are not authorized for that room. I left something inside. Administration has searched the room. Not everything. Then state the item.
She stopped.
The hallway had filled now. Candidates, parents, even 2 judges near the backstage door, watching with professional discomfort. Celia looked trapped in the exact way she once made me look unstable. Breath fast, hair loosening, hands shaking around her violin case. My notes, she whispered. What notes? Professor Ilian asked from behind her. My interpretation notes. In Miss Ven's assigned practice room? Celia's eyes flashed toward Professor Vale, who stood near the lobby entrance, very still. It was the first time I saw him afraid. Not dramatically. Not guilt-ridden. Afraid in the practical sense, afraid of emails, committees, donor questions, reputational weather. Celia saw him fail to rescue her, and something childish broke open in her face. He said it was fine, she blurted. The silence that followed had a body. Professor Vale closed his eyes. Mrs. Arden's bracelet stopped flashing because her hand had gone still. Professor Ilian said, Who said what was fine? Celia pressed her lips together, realizing too late that desperation was an honest language. From inside the auditorium, faint applause rose for Candidate 17's exit announcement. The stage manager, now visibly alarmed, said, Candidate 18's performance time has begun. Daniel looked at the auditorium doors, then at Celia. I cannot accompany without confirmed music. Celia spun toward him. You know the music. I know the official submission. I do not know stolen marginalia. Stop saying that. Then perform what you submitted. Such a simple sentence. Such a devastating one. Perform what you submitted.
Play what you prepared.
Stand on what belongs to you. Celia stared at him as if he had asked her to walk barefoot over broken glass. I need a minute. You have had months, he said. Her face crumpled, but this time the tears came with fury. Mara did this. She knew. She changed everything. She set me up. Everyone turned to me again, and the old panic rose one final time. Being watched had once made me shrink. It had made me want to explain until my throat hurt. But rebirth had taught me something brutal. Explanations are for people willing to hear them. Records are for everyone else. I lifted my phone. I have my room assignment, my message refusing access, the screenshot Daniel sent, and photos of the scarf and wardrobe key before anyone touched them. Administration has the items. I have not entered Celia's assigned room, touched her case, or interfered with her official submission. I came prepared for my audition. My voice did not shake. Professor Ilian looked at Ms. Renner. She nodded. The stage manager said more softly now, "We need to proceed." The auditorium door opened. A judge's assistant leaned out. "Is candidate 18 ready?" Celia's mouth opened, but no sound came. Then the assistant checked the program and said the sentence that rewrote 2 lives. "If she is not ready, we will mark her absent and move to candidate 19. Absent. Not betrayed. Not misunderstood. Not tragically delayed by another girl's cruelty. Absent. A small administrative word, flat as a stamp, heavy as a stone. Celia heard it and seemed to fold inward. Mrs. Arden recovered first, sweeping forward with enough indignation to power the building. "Absolutely not. My daughter has been targeted all morning. You cannot penalize her for institutional negligence." Professor Ilian's face settled into the gray calm of a man choosing policy over donors, possibly for the first time that day. "Mrs. Arden, candidate 18 is present but refusing to proceed without unauthorized materials allegedly located in another candidate's practice room. The panel cannot delay the audition schedule for that." "Unauthorized?" Mrs. Arden snapped. "They are her notes." Daniel said, "Then she can perform them from memory." Celia looked at him with pure betrayal, as if the person telling the truth had committed the crime. In the first life, I had wondered for years why nobody defended me. Now I understood one piece of it. Defending the truth in public makes everyone look at you, and most people would rather be privately decent than publicly useful. Daniel had chosen public usefulness, and it cost him Celia's hatred instantly. The judge's assistant waited another 10 seconds, then nodded to the stage manager. "Candidate 19, please be ready."
The door closed.
Through the thick wood, the audience murmured, unaware of the small execution happening outside. Celia stood frozen. Her audition had not vanished in chaos. It had started, continued, and moved on without her because she had placed her preparation inside someone else's surrender and then found the door locked. I thought I would feel triumph. Instead, I felt an ache so old it seemed borrowed from the girl I used to be. Not pity for Celia. Never that. Pity would imply she had slipped. She had climbed. She had planned. She had pressed her shoes into my fingers and called it friendship. The ache was for how close I had come, in both lives, to believing girls like us had to fight each other for oxygen while men like Vale called theft guidance and parents like Mrs. Arden called consequences targeting. Then Celia's eyes found mine through the crowd, and any philosophical softness burned away. "You're nothing without me," she said. It was not loud, but everyone heard. There was the real thesis of our friendship. Not "I loved you." Not "I needed you." Nothing without me. My first life self would have shattered. My second life self tilted her head. "Then today should be easy for you." A few people inhaled. Someone, impossibly, stifled a laugh. Celia lunged one step forward, but Mrs. Arden grabbed her arm. Professor Vale finally moved, approaching Professor Ilian with a low voice. "This has gone far enough." Ilian looked at him, and perhaps he too heard the wrong note. "Yes," he said. "It has." Candidate 19 played a clean Mozart that sounded terrified but honest. Candidate 20 overpedaled. Candidate 21 forgot a repeat and recovered with admirable violence. Time did not stop for Celia's humiliation. That was another truth I had not expected. When my life ended the first time, the world kept clapping for other people. Now her world had cracked open, and the audition schedule simply advanced. I sat in the green room with my violin across my lap, feeling the building breathe around me. Celia had been escorted to a side office with her mother, Professor Vale, Ms. Renner, and Professor Ilian. Daniel sat 2 chairs away from me, flipping through the official score with a pencil, though his hands were too tense for actual marking. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I owe you more than sorry. I looked at him. Probably.
He winced.
Fair. It would have been easy to absolve him. Old Mara would have rushed to make him comfortable, because discomfort in others felt like a problem she had caused. New Mara let him sit inside it. After a while, he said, "She told me you were brilliant but unstable. She said if I mentioned anything to you directly, you might spiral and withdraw. She framed it as protecting you." "People love protecting women by not listening to them," I said. His pencil stopped. "Yes," he said quietly. "They do." That surprised me. Not enough to trust him, but enough to file him under maybe human. The stage manager entered. "Candidate 22, 5 minutes." My body responded before my mind did. Heartbeat high. Fingers cold. Mouth dry. Not fear of Celia now. Something worse. The knowledge that after all the strategy, all the evidence, all the locked doors, I still had to walk on stage and play. Revenge could clear the hallway. It could not perform the Bach for me. I stood, opened the violin case, and saw the green notebook tucked safely beneath the compartment strap. For one instant, I considered reading the new cadenza notes again. Then I closed the case without touching them. Celia had needed my notes because she did not trust her own hands. I would not make the same mistake in reverse. Daniel stood. "Do you want accompaniment exactly as submitted?" "No," I said. "Follow me in the cadenza transition." I changed it. He looked alarmed, then curious. "How much?" "Enough. That is either brave or stupid 5 minutes before a panel." "I've been both." He almost smiled. The stage manager opened the door to the backstage corridor. Beyond it, the auditorium waited with its red velvet seats, its bright stage, its judges hidden in the glow. In my first life, I had never reached that threshold in time. I had imagined it for years afterward until the fantasy turned poisonous. Now I was here, and the strangest thought came to me. The stage did not care who deserved it. It only asked who arrived. I arrived. As I stepped forward, a door down the hall opened and Celia's voice spilled out, rough with panic. "Mara." Everyone turned. She stood in the side office doorway, eyes swollen, hair half unpinned, one hand gripping the frame. For a heartbeat, she looked less like a rival and more like a child caught stealing candy, unable to understand why sweetness had consequences. "Please," she said, "just tell them we were sharing notes. Tell them it was normal. I'll say I was confused. We can fix this."
We.
The most dangerous word in a manipulator's mouth. I looked at the stage door, then back at her. In another life, my audition had started without me because I had tried to save her from the embarrassment she designed for me. This time, my audition was waiting, and I refused to spend one more second outside my own life. "No," I said. Then I walked on stage. The stage lights were hotter than memory. They erased the audience into a dark sea and turned the judges into silhouettes with pens. The floorboards creaked once under my left heel. Daniel sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and glanced at me. I nodded. Not because I was ready in the magical sense. I was not calm. I was not healed. I was a girl carrying 2 lives in one body, one of them bruised, one of them burning, and both of them demanding sound. I placed the violin under my chin. The first note of Bach entered the hall alone.
No piano. No ornament.
Just a line so exposed that any lie inside me would have shown. I played it slower than I had planned. The old Mara would have rushed, eager to prove she deserved the room, the slot, the breath. The new Mara let the silence between phrases do some of the work. I thought of my mother in the first life gripping the steering wheel after the rejection email, saying, "We know what happened," as if knowing could pay tuition. I thought of my father sanding a cheap bridge at the kitchen table under yellow light. I thought of every teacher who praised my discipline but borrowed my ideas for louder students. The Bach widened. It did not sound wounded. It sounded awake. When Daniel entered for the St. Sands, I felt him listening harder than before, not leading, not rescuing, following with the kind of attention that does not announce itself as generosity. The piece gathered speed. My fingers found shifts I had missed in rehearsal. Not perfect.
Alive.
Then came the cadenza transition, the place where Celia had expected to wear my architecture like a borrowed gown. I stepped into the new version. Low register first. Darker. A phrase bent almost to breaking, then held. The pause I added opened across the hall, like a held breath. I let the harmonic ring, silver and thin, until it seemed impossible it could continue, then cut upward through the run with a clean ferocity that startled even me. Somewhere in the darkness, a judge's pen stopped moving. I did not smile. Smiling would have made it smaller. The cadenza was no longer evidence. It was not a trap. It was mine because I was inside it, changing with it, risking it in real time. Celia could have copied every note from my green notebook and still failed to play that moment, because the moment required the one thing she had never practiced, standing alone. By the final movement, sweat ran down my spine and my left shoulder burned. I welcomed the pain. It proved I was not remembering. I was doing. The last note struck, bloomed, and vanished into the rafters. Silence followed. Not long, maybe 1 second, maybe 2, but deep enough that my first life could fall into it and finally stop calling my name from the wrong hallway. Then applause rose. Not thunderous at first. Careful, then warmer, then full. I lowered the violin. In the front row, Professor Ilian sat motionless, eyes fixed on me, as if seeing a student he had misplaced. Beside him, one of the external judges leaned toward another and whispered something behind her program. Daniel stood from the piano and gave me the smallest nod. I bowed, not to Celia, not to the donors, not to the old room or the key, to the girl who had missed her audition once and still found her way back to the stage. When I came off stage, the hallway felt different, though nothing visible had changed. Same beige walls, same tape signs, same students pretending not to stare. But rumor had shifted direction. It moved around me now with caution, as if I had become a hot surface. Candidate 23 avoided my eyes, then whispered, "That was incredible. So quickly I almost missed it." A freshman near the water cooler gave me a thumbs up and immediately looked terrified of himself. Daniel followed a few steps behind, carrying his tablet. "You changed more than the transition," he said. "Yes. You should write that down before you forget it." "I won't forget." He studied me, perhaps hearing something strange in my certainty, then nodded. Down the hall, the side office door was closed again. Behind it, voices rose and fell. Mrs. Arden's anger had a particular frequency, sharp and expensive. Professor Vale's was lower, defensive. Celia's voice, when it appeared, sounded cracked. I thought I would want to listen. I didn't. That surprised me more than anything. For years in my first life, I had imagined her confession in detail. I wanted her cornered, exposed, begging. I wanted the teachers to apologize, the donors to gasp, the world to rewind publicly enough that my private grief felt validated. But after walking off stage, the office drama seemed distant, almost dull. Not unimportant. Consequences mattered. Evidence mattered. But I had mistaken exposure for restoration. Exposure could return a key. It could not return years. Restoration had happened under the lights when I played what she could not steal. Still, the world was not finished being theatrical. At 12:05, as candidates gathered for the preliminary results announcement, Professor Ilian stepped onto the small lobby platform with Ms. Renner beside him. The audition results would usually be posted quietly at the end of the day, but his expression told everyone something else was coming. Conversations died one by one. Celia stood near the rear exit with her mother, face powdered back into shape, though no powder could hide the red around her eyes. Professor Vale stood apart from them, phone in hand, jaw set. "Before we continue," Ilian said, "the conservatory must address an irregularity affecting today's audition process." The room inhaled. He did not look at me. He did not look at Celia. That professionalism, more than any accusation, made the moment real. Evidence has been presented of unauthorized access to administrative materials, misrepresentation of candidate communications, and attempted use of another candidate's assigned resources. Pending formal review, Candidate 18, Celia Arden, is disqualified from today's grand audition. Mrs. Arden made a sound like glass striking marble. Celia went perfectly still. The word disqualified traveled through the lobby faster than any rumor, clean and official. Ilian continued. Additionally, Professor Adrian Vale has been asked to recuse himself from all judging and advisory roles connected to this audition pending review of studio conduct. That was the real earthquake. Students turned openly now. Professor Vale's face drained of color, then flushed dark. He stepped forward as if to object, but 3 donors were watching, and donors loved genius until it looked messy.
He stopped.
Celia stared at him with a betrayal so total it almost made me laugh. She had expected him to be a shield. Instead, he had become another locked door. The results were not announced until late afternoon because institutions enjoy making young people age several years in waiting rooms. By then, the sky outside had turned the color of pewter and rain threaded down the practice wing windows. I sat on the floor outside 408, not inside it because my reservation had ended and I no longer needed to guard the room like a fortress. The key lay in my palm, small and ordinary again. Around me, life continued with insulting normality. Someone complained about a broken vending machine. A tenor laughed too loudly at his own joke. Candidate 19 called her father and burst into tears before saying whether the tears were good or bad. I thought about texting my mother, but I wanted to tell her after everything was certain. In my first life, she had learned my disaster from my voice cracking over the phone. This time, I wanted a hand her joy fully formed. Footsteps stopped in front of me.
Celia.
She had changed out of the blue gown into jeans and a white coat, but her makeup remained, giving her ruined expression an eerie stage brightness. For a second, neither of us spoke. Without an audience, she looked different. Not softer. Emptier. Like a room after props had been removed. "Are you happy?" she asked. The question was so predictable, I almost felt tired. "No," her mouth twisted. "Liar. I'm free. That's different." She flinched, perhaps because some part of her understood. Then she crouched, bringing herself to my level, though even that felt like strategy. "You don't know what you've done.
My mother is talking to the board.
Professor Vale has connections. This won't stick." "Maybe. You think evidence matters? You think being right matters?" She laughed, and there was enough truth in it to make the hallway colder. "Mara, you're still so naive." In the first life, that would have frightened me because she was right. Evidence had not mattered when nobody wanted inconvenience. Being right had not kept me from losing. But this time, evidence existed in more than my shaking voice. Daniel had forwarded messages. Ms. Renner had the key. Mr. Niles had the sign and log. Security had footage. And most importantly, I had performed. The narrative no longer had an empty space for Celia to fill. "Maybe I am," I said. "But you still missed your audition." Her face hardened. "Because of you."
No.
"Because you could not perform without what you planned to take from me." The words landed between us with no decoration. Celia looked away first. Rain tapped the window. Somewhere behind the walls, a pianist began practicing arpeggios, each note neat as falling beads. When Celia spoke again, her voice was lower. "You were always supposed to help me." There it was at last.
Not an apology.
Not even denial.
The root.
"Why?" I asked. She looked genuinely confused. "Because you could. Because you didn't know what to do with attention anyway. Because when people praised you, you looked like you wanted to apologize. I knew how to use it." I stared at her, and the strangest thing happened. The last piece of jealousy I had carried for Celia dissolved. Not dramatically. Quietly. I had envied her confidence for years, but it had never been confidence. It was appetite with good posture.
"Thank you," I said.
She recoiled. For what? For finally saying it plainly. She stood so fast her coat swung. "You'll regret this." "I already told you," I said, closing my fist around the key. "I'm done with that part." She left without another word, but her footsteps were uneven. At 5:40, the results went up on the lobby board. In movies, moments like that happen in slow motion with music swelling and faces turning toward the heroine. In real life, someone shouted, "They're posted," and 30 exhausted musicians nearly trampled each other beneath a framed portrait of the conservatory founder. I stayed back at first, not because I was noble, because suddenly I was terrified. All day I had focused on preventing the theft, surviving the accusation, reaching the stage. Winning had become an idea I kept at a distance, too bright to touch. What if I had exposed Celia and still lost? What if the panel admired my performance but chose someone safer? What if rebirth did not guarantee reward, only responsibility? Daniel found my eyes across the lobby and lifted his brows as if to say, "Are you coming?" I forced myself forward. The crowd parted strangely. Not fully, not respectfully, but enough. My name was on the list. First alternate?
No.
Finalist?
No.
Recipient. Mara Ven, Grand Audition Scholarship, European Summer Circuit. For a moment, the letters did not assemble into meaning. They were just black marks on white paper. Then sound vanished. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might be ill. Someone touched my shoulder, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was Ms. Renner, smiling with tired eyes. "Congratulations, Miss Ven." "Congratulations. Not condolences." "Not unfortunately. Not we regret to inform you." My mouth opened, and no graceful words came. I laughed once, then covered my face, and the tears arrived before I could forbid them. They were not pretty. They were not controlled. They were not Celia's instrument. They were mine, and nobody in the lobby seemed to know what to do with them. Then Daniel began clapping. One person joined. Then another. Then more. Awkward at first, then genuine enough to embarrass me. I looked toward the rear exit and saw Celia standing half hidden behind a column. Her face was unreadable, but her mother was already on the phone, lips thin with fury. Professor Vale was nowhere to be seen. For a second, Celia and I looked at each other across the lobby where one life had ended and another had finally begun. In the first life, she had stood beneath chandeliers wearing my hairpin while applause gathered around her like a borrowed halo. This time, she stood outside the circle, empty-handed. I thought she might cry again, or mouth some threat, or turn away dramatically. Instead, she simply looked confused, as if the universe had broken a private agreement with her. Maybe it had. Maybe the agreement had always been with my silence, and I had finally stopped signing. I stepped closer to the board, reached out, and touched my printed name with 2 fingers. It stayed there. Solid. Official.
Meaning.
Then I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, breathless from work. "Mara, is everything okay?" I tried to speak and failed. Her voice sharpened. "Mara?" I swallowed, smiling through tears so hard my cheeks hurt. "Mum," I said. "My audition started on time." She was silent for half a second, confused, because in this life, she did not know the wound inside that sentence. Then I said, "I won." The sound she made was small and broken and bright, and for the first time all day, I let myself feel joy without checking whether anyone else deserved comfort more. The formal review lasted 3 weeks, though the story people told about it changed every day. Celia's mother claimed the conservatory had scapegoated her daughter to protect administrative incompetence. Professor Vale claimed pedagogical influence had been misinterpreted by oversensitive students in a competitive environment. Anonymous accounts posted that I had orchestrated everything because poor girls understood optics better than rich ones. For a while, the backlash hurt more than I expected. Rebirth had made me strategic, not bulletproof. I still flinched when whispers stopped as I entered rooms. I still checked my locker twice. I still woke some nights with the old announcement in my ears. But the difference between the first life and the second was not that everyone believed me. Everyone never believes anyone. The difference was that I no longer needed universal belief to stand upright. Daniel gave a written statement and lost 2 accompaniment bookings from families close to the Ardens, then gained 6 from students who preferred pianists who did not tolerate forged messages. Ms. Renner found that the wardrobe key had been removed from the lockbox using Professor Vale's faculty code at 11:13 the night before the audition. Security footage showed Celia entering the practice wing after hours with the blue scarf around her neck and leaving without it. The forged message was traced to an online spoofing app purchased through a prepaid card. Not enough for criminal fireworks, but enough for disciplinary gravity. Most damning of all, 3 other students came forward after the first week. A flautist whose competition arrangement had appeared in Celia's recital. A pianist whose donor introduction had somehow been accidentally redirected. A mezzo-soprano who had once lent Celia a practice room and later found her audition dress stained with foundation. That is the thing about locked doors. Once one holds, others realize they were allowed to close theirs too. Celia withdrew before the committee could expel her, which her mother framed as protecting her mental health from a hostile artistic environment. Professor Vale resigned from studio leadership and took a visiting post overseas, which the newsletter described as pursuing international opportunities. Institutions, I learned, rarely confess. They translate shame into neutral language and print it in serif fonts. But Celia did not perform at the spring gala. Her name disappeared from the donor program. Her practice room reservation vanished from the weekly schedule. And room 408, which had once felt like a battlefield, became simply a room again. I used it every morning until I left for Europe. Sometimes I imagine my first life self standing in the corner, barefoot, clutching that ruined violin case, waiting for someone to open the door. I wanted to tell her I was sorry. I wanted to tell her she was not stupid for trusting. She had been trained to believe generosity would be returned in kind, and training is not stupidity. But I also wanted to tell her the sentence that saved me. Kindness without boundaries is just a room key passed to someone who has already planned what to steal. The night before my flight to Vienna, I returned to the practice wing alone. The conservatory was nearly empty, summer heat pressing against the windows, hall lights dimmed to gold. My suitcase waited in the dorm lobby. My scholarship documents were folded in my backpack. The green notebook was tucked safely beside my passport. I had already said goodbye to my parents, cried in the kitchen, promised my mother I would eat proper meals, promised my father I would send photos of old violins from every museum I entered. But I had one farewell left. Mr. Niles was at the front desk reading a mystery novel. He looked up over his glasses when I signed in. Room 408, one last time? One last time, I said. He slid the clipboard toward me. Keep the pen. For luck. It was an ugly blue ballpoint with a chewed cap. I accepted it solemnly. Thank you. Room 408 was dark when I entered. I did not turn on the overhead light at first. Moonlight lay across the floorboards, silvering the piano, the stand, the mirror. I stood in the doorway and remembered the girl who had once believed access meant safety. Then I remembered Celia outside the same door, twisting the handle, discovering the world did not always open. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt quiet. Victory is loud only before you have it. Afterward, it becomes responsibility. I turned on the lamp, unpacked my violin, and played the cadenza one last time for the empty room. Not the old version Celia wanted. Not even the exact version from the audition. A new one. Softer at the start, wilder at the end. Music refused to stay evidence. It kept becoming life. When I finished, I lowered the violin and heard clapping from the hallway. I turned sharply. Celia stood in the open doorway. For one insane second, the first life and second life overlapped so completely I could not move. She looked thinner, hair cut shorter, no makeup except smudged mascara, a duffel bag on her shoulder. Mr. Niles let me in, she said. Public hallway.
Don't worry.
I did not answer. She stepped no closer. I'm leaving tonight. Where? The question escaped before I could stop it. My aunt's place. Then maybe another school. Maybe not music. She laughed once, bitter and small. Everyone keeps asking if I'm devastated, like I didn't do it to myself. That was almost an apology, but almost is a country manipulator's visit when exile gets cold. I waited. Celia looked at the piano bench, then at me. I found your old hairpin in my jewelry box. My breath caught. In this life, she had never stolen it on audition day. But apparently some thefts had happened before the branch in time. She reached into her coat pocket and held it out on her palm, a small silver hairpin shaped like a laurel leaf, tarnished at the edges. My father had bought it from a market stall after my first youth orchestra solo. In the first life, seeing it in Celia's publicity photos had hurt more than losing jewelry should hurt because it proved she did not just want my opportunities. She wanted trophies from the taking. I did not step forward. Leave it on the piano. Her face tightened, perhaps expecting gratitude, forgiveness, something warm enough to carry away. Mara. Leave it on the piano, I repeated.
She did.
The tiny click of metal on wood sounded final.
At the door, she paused.
Do you ever wonder if we could have been real friends? The question was dangerous because the answer was yes. Once, before ambition sharpened her and fear shrank me, there had been moments that felt real. Laughing over instant noodles, sharing rosin, whispering about teachers. But a real moment does not redeem a false pattern. I looked at her, this girl who had stolen from me, used me, hated me, and still somehow wanted me to comfort the ghost of what she might have been. Real friends don't need keys to each other's rooms, I said. She absorbed that, nodded once, and left. I waited until her footsteps faded before crossing to the piano. The hairpin lay under the lamp, dull silver, smaller than memory. I picked it up, slid it into my braid, and looked in the mirror. For the first time in 2 lives, it looked like mine. Years later, people would ask about the grand audition as if it had been a dramatic origin story, a neat before and after they could package for interviews. Is it true your rival was disqualified right before you won? They would ask, leaning in with delighted horror. Is it true a stolen key exposed everything? Sometimes I told them the polite version. There was an administrative issue. I stayed focused. The panel was generous. Sometimes, when I spoke to younger musicians, especially the girls with apologetic shoulders and overstuffed folders, I told the truer version without names. I told them talent attracts admiration, but access attracts appetite. I told them not everyone who asks to share your light wants warmth. Some want to learn where the switch is. I told them documentation is not paranoia when the room has already been entered once. I told them no is a complete sentence, but a complete sentence can still shake in your mouth the first time you say it. And when they asked whether revenge made me happy, I told them revenge was only the hallway. The life was what happened after I walked through the door. In Vienna, I played until my fingers blistered and healed harder. In Prague, I got lost before a masterclass and performed better because I arrived laughing. In Milan, Maestro Bellini shouted at me for rushing, then later told a donor I had a spine in the sound, which I decided to take as praise. Daniel and I worked together twice more, never becoming close friends, but building a clean professional respect that felt better than forced intimacy. Ms. Renner sent me an email every winter with a subject line, Records Matter, and a scholarship update attached. My mother framed the audition program in our hallway, not because my name was printed as recipient, but because beneath it she taped the ugly blue pen Mr. Niles gave me, saying, "This is the pen you used to sign yourself in." She understood somehow. Mothers often do. As for Celia, I heard stories. She studied arts management. She worked for a festival. She married a man with a quiet face and no musical opinions. Once, at a reception in Berlin, I saw her across a crowded room. Older, elegant, careful. She saw me too. For a second, both of us were back in that hallway, one of us with a key, one of us without. Then she lifted her glass slightly. Not an apology, not friendship, an acknowledgement, perhaps, that the door had closed and we had both lived beyond it. I lifted mine back. Then I turned toward the stage where my name was being called, not as a missing candidate, not as someone's unstable friend, not as a girl who should have shared, but as the soloist. The applause began before I stepped into the light. I touched the laurel hairpin in my hair, breathed once, and smiled. The first time my audition started without me, I thought my life had been stolen by a girl with pretty tears and my practice room key. The second time, I learned something sharper and kinder than revenge. Sometimes the future does not need you to destroy anyone. Sometimes it only needs you to lock the door, keep what is yours, arrive on time, and let the people who built their performance on your surrender discover silence, where your permission used to be.